Today we'll continue with the Holey welding cart. In part 1 I got the side braces fabricated. Now I'll start making the backbone. This is the largest component of the cart, and it has 77 holes and 5 bends, so I want to make sure I get it right. I made a full-size layout from my CAD drawings to check all the dimensions. I made a mock-up of one row of holes, including the bends, with flanges on 3 sides, and checked it against the gas bottles. I transferred the layout to a piece of 16-gauge steel, trimmed the edges, and made pilot holes for each of the punched and flared holes. Next, I went to the brake and bent the flange on the top edge. Then, I made the 2 bends near the center. Last, I bent the flanges on the long edges. There's another bend needed between the outer rows of holes. I'll do that later. Now I can go to the press and use the punch and flare dies to make the holes. I also made a platform to hold the weight of the work. Looking good so far. I had to get creative to punch the side holes. I made an extension to raise the punch and flare dies to a good working height. I can't flare the outer holes yet because my bending brake would flatten the flares. I do need to punch the holes in one side, however, and you'll see why in a minute. Now we'll go back to the brake and bend the last 2 sides. I had to use the left edge of the brake for this bend so I wouldn't crush the top flange. Back at the press, you can see why I had to punch the holes to allow the use of a shaft to go between the ram of the machine and the punch and flare dies. For a more finished look, I'll round the top corners of the backbone. I'm using one of my dies as a radius template. So now I have a nicely rounded corner. I'll use chipboard to make a pattern for the flange on the corner. I'll clamp the board into place and mark the inner edges. I'll do the rough trimming, then clamp it in place again and mark the needed width. I'll cut the blank slightly oversized and trim it after it's welded into place. I'll shape a piece of metal to fit this corner. I'll grip it with locking pliers so I have leverage to bend it. And now it's ready to weld. Now we'll weld the joints on the top flange. I made the filler piece slightly oversized. Now I'll mark it with tape for trimming. Now we'll cut away the excess metal and sand the edge smooth. Now I'll make the shelves that hold the welders. I've cut blanks from 16-gauge steel, and I'll mark 1-inch flanges to be bent on each edge. I'll punch a 3/16 relief hole in each corner. I'm using an abrasive cutoff wheel to notch each corner. You'll see in a minute why I'm notching one corner at 45 degrees. Now we'll go to the break and bend each edge to 90 degrees. The gap on the right side of the leaf allows a flanged edge to be bent. Now you see why I notched one corner to 45 degrees. This allows a standard break to bend a flange on all 4 sides. With all the flanges formed, we can weld up the corners. I'm using a piece of aluminum angle as a backer for the corner welds. Steel won't stick to aluminum, so it's ideal for this application. Since the aluminum backer acts as a heat sink, I'll turn the heat on the welder up 1 level using the auto set feature. I'll do the other corners in the same way. Now it's time to sand the corner welds smooth. I'll start by cutting off the excess metal on the filler piece. Next, I'll sand the welds smooth in the traditional way. Before I weld these parts together, I want to do a trial assembly on my drawing to make sure everything's lining up the way I want it to. So these 2 parts will get joined down here. I've made a bracket that caps the back end of these parts. I just want to make sure that that fits in place. Looks like that's a good fit. And the bracket has some nuts tack welded to it for the screws that will hold this to the upright portion behind it. I'll fit these brackets into place now using one of the welder shelves to space them the proper distance apart. I'll line up the bottom edge and use a clamp to hold the bottom edge in place. Make sure the top edge is snug up against the shelf. Clamp that into place. And I'll use a transfer punch to go through each one of these nuts to make a mark for the hole for the bolt. Now I can pull this apart. And now I can drill each of the pilot holes. Now I'll open these up to 1/4 inch using a step drill. I'm ready to weld these components together now. I have everything clamped up to the table. I'm going to put this cap strip on the back side and then I can tack weld them together. I'll do a trial fit on these parts to make sure everything fits properly. Everything looks great, so it's ready to be finish welded. I'm welding with short bursts here to fill a gap. Now I'll sand everything smooth. The casters fit into tubes, and I'm using an automotive freeze plug to cap the end. I built the second side right on top of the first to make sure they're exactly the same size and shape. And the next step is adding the tube for the caster. I have a nice attachment for my belt sander designed for making joints like this. The fit on the top end looks good, so I'll work on the bottom. So that is just about perfect. So now we'll get the tube clamped into place and tack welded. Now I'll sand the weld down smooth. Now I can attach the plate that supports the gas cylinders. It's a piece of 16 gauge steel with a flange bent on one edge. And this is cut to size to fit the backbone of the welding cart. And I have this positioned so I have a corner-to-corner fit on both ends. You can see that the metal in the center is a little bit distorted because of the holes we punched in it. We're going to fit the ends first and then tap this joint down to get a nice corner-to-corner fit as we continue tack welding. So I can take the support out now. And we'll put the next tack about an inch from this end. And the same on this end. Now we'll adjust these so I have a nice corner-to-corner fit. And now I can start tapping these high spots down. So that's how a little hammering can give us a nice fit up at the joint. I've turned this upside down so gravity helps hold this plate into place. And again, I'll line up the corners and tack weld those first. Now I can tap the areas with a hammer that are standing proud of the surface. I'll tack weld the other side and put this back on my table to finish the weld. So these corners cleaned up beautifully. There's a couple of small gaps to fill on these bottom corners, and I've cut pieces of metal to fit. I'll use a magnet to temporarily hold that part in place, and then I'll clamp it securely for tack welding. Okay, we're ready to go. Now I can weld the other side and sand them both smooth. It's time to assemble all the pieces now. Before I put the side brace into place, I'm going to put a small bracket onto it that will align the bottom welder shelf. I'll hold that in place with a screw. And this is temporary. You'll see how it's used in just a minute. And now we can assemble this brace to the back. Now I'll put the bottom shelf into place. I'll slip it in through these brackets. I'll put a support in the back. I'll use small clamps to pull this up tight against the backbone. I'll put some spring clamps on the front to make sure everything's held tightly together. I want to make sure this shelf is parallel with the base. So I did a dry run on this previously and found just the right spacer for the distance between these and the front. I'll make sure that we have that same distance in the rear. So now I know these two are parallel. And I'll drill pilot holes through the backbone into the shelf. Now we'll use clecos to hold these parts together. I need to mark where these sliding brackets meet the shelf. So I'll get a Sharpie marker for that. So now I can disassemble this and make the holes for the front of the shelf. So this bracket will enable me to find the center for the hole in the shelf. And I'll do the same for the other side. Now I can get the bottom shelf fastened into place. I'm fitting nuts to the back side of this. And now we'll put the screws in the front. So the bottom shelf is fitted into place. The cart is really starting to take shape now. Most of the fabrication is done, and in the final video, we'll tackle the finishing touches and get it ready for work. I love making these videos and I'm honored that you're watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified about new videos. I read all comments and I do my best to answer all questions. If you like these videos, you can click the Patreon link and join the group of great people who help me create new videos. This helps more than you know.